It appears as though we are streaming live again. Am I correct?
Oh. Yep, we are live.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I'll just wait to see all the councillors. Anybody at home watching? Oops, sorry, little glitch there, but hey, we solved it. Okay, I think we're all here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Councillor Mayor's still missing. But we will restart the meeting. So we're moving on to item D3, which is a verbal report on the Quarry Lake portion of the integrated parking management program. And Mr. Asarte, over to you.
Good afternoon again, Mayor and Council.
Good afternoon.
Okay. I'm pleased to be here again to provide a summary of the transportation management program for Quarry Lake, which was approved back in March of this year. I'm joined by several staff that have been instrumental in implementing the project. Carla Reinhardis from Finance, who has led customer service for the program, Greg Burt from Bylaw, who has led enforcement, and Adam Robertson from Communications, responsible for engagement, education, and providing the community with information. For the presentation, there are a number of slides with statistics and information. Please ask clarifying questions. I would suggest saving discussion until the end of the presentation when I would be pleased to answer or have a member of the team respond.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Just need my slideshow to start. There we go. So for our agenda, we will go through an overview of the council approval. We are going to look at the summer program data. We will talk about lessons learned and what we've heard, look at next steps, and then the opportunity at the end for council feedback and discussion. First, the approval. It was two-part that council direct administration to implement a paid parking program at Quarry Lake as presented in the request for decision, and then the council approve a new capital project for a seasonal route to Quarry Lake, and that included purchase of a very good value on an electric bus, and that was intended to have operations begin as soon as 2022 and include some stop infrastructure and a charger. That project was funded largely by grants and general capital reserve. The situation at the time of the approval, we were looking to address growing usage at Quarry Lake. It really spiked in the summer of 2020 due to COVID impacts that pressured roadways, parking, Quarry Lake facilities, and all of the natural areas. And that impact also spilled over into parking issues on Highway 7042 and into adjacent neighborhoods. And this created a number of safety challenges and challenges around those congested parking areas and roadways. The design of the program was aligned with parking management goals, pricing strategy that would address demand and address the negative effects that came with being over capacity, a program with positive net revenues, which could fund transportation initiatives as well as enhancements in the Quarry Lake Park area potentially. And on the community side, the program was designed to align with desires and expectations we heard through our engagement process, that we protect the neighborhoods from spillover effects and make the whole of Quarry Lake parking available for resident use with plenty of parking for dog walking. The program rolled out with visitor paid parking with a fixed fee of $20 in the peak season and $10 in the off season. Fees were set to encourage visitors to enjoy the park for 4 hours or less and to encourage turnover, while the minimum per use charge was in line with other day use fees for locations and facilities of a similar nature. We estimated revenues would be approximately $180,000 and operating costs of $100,000 higher in year one, because of the entire program operating costs being funded by just Quarry Lake, and a much smaller area than planned in the town center. So that was what we were looking at with the estimated net revenue of 80,000. So in terms of results, we've procured the bus. Charger installation is ongoing. We're looking to get a couple of stops constructed potentially as soon as this fall. We have received confirmation from the province for a capital grant for a 3-year pilot route. So that was unknown at the time of the council approval, and that was really great development over the summer. And that will actually cover up to roughly 80% of all of the costs, capital costs, and support half of the operating costs. The province has asked that we wait until 2023 to start the route, and that's when they'll have their parking and bus facility complete at Grassy Lakes. And so in the proposed operating budget, that's where you'll see it. The lots were reorganized and there was an expansion of the lot, and that's helped manage access and egress and increase the design capacity. Bylaws noted that this has dramatically improved safety for parking lot users and pedestrians. Now, this chart shows capacity at the lot with the green line. That's a total lot capacity of about 135 stalls. The blue line shows how full the lot was on an individual day, and the dots indicate the temperature on that day. Bylaw monitored a week each in June, July, and August with AM and PM observations. Parking demand was the highest early in the season, and on those really hot period we had in June and July. And we also saw good use on warmer, clear August weekends. Demand waned as the summer progressed and was affected by smoke and cooler temperatures. We also feel there's potential impacts from a cooling effect of pricing, traffic management throughout the quarter, including efforts by Alberta Parks. And we saw with lifting of COVID restrictions, some changes in demand for these outdoor facilities. We found that the vast majority of Quarry Lake parking lot users are visitors, particularly on our busiest days. It's likely a greater proportion of the walk and cycle trips to the lake are taken by locals versus visitors. So total lake use splits are different, and it's not possible to know that with the data we have at the moment. So this reflects parking lot usage. Usage in general declined as the summer wore on, with a decline in both resident and visitor use. That decline was greater with visitors, and I spoke to some of the reasons why that may be. Now, we really need additional years of observations to have a better understanding of cause and effect there. Through payment data, we have confirmation of days and times of highest demands. We're able to see that in the data. Weekends are about 70% busier than weekends for parking lot use, though hot weather can fill the parking lot on any day of the week, and use is highest over an 8 or 9 midday period, not unlike our roadways. Permit revenue came from purchase of extra residential parking passes, shown in yellow, and extra Quarry Lake parking permits, shown in green. Fees were intended as both a way to account for the extra administrative time and to encourage people to only apply for those passes that they needed. Total permit revenue for the summer is approximately $8,000. Sorry, for the program to date is $8,000. Pay parking revenues came from the Quarry Lake parking lot only, either through the app or online options shown in yellow and orange, or through pay machine payments shown in green. Parking revenues were highest in June and July, the 2 months with unseasonably hot weather. Those months also had less than half the annual average precipitation. That good weather period, together with expenses that were lower than projected, has resulted in a net revenue projection for 2021 that will be in the $220,000 range. For future years, we should anticipate slightly lower revenues. However, we should anticipate also slightly lower operating expenses as costs get distributed over more pay parking areas. We project net revenues for future years in the 200,000 range. Over 4,000 permits were issued by our customer service team, the majority early in the season, and for Quarry Lake, approximately 200 permits were issued in the residential parking permit zones. The new parking enforcement app can track location types and dates of violation. Though we did have a number of violations in RPP zones, a large proportion came on just one day on July 1st. We had quite a presence early in the season with enforcement, made updates to the signage and had a continuous presence of bylaw officers, which is credited with largely addressing spillover issues in residential areas. Also worth noting, the expanded zones did see violations within them. However, we didn't have issues. We didn't see too many issues outside of the zones, and we also didn't have too many complaints about the extent of the zone. So I think the council modified zones ended up working quite well. This shows violations on Highway 742. Likewise, on Highway 742, we had a number of violations, again, that came on a single day. And over the August long weekend. And again, this could be credited to enforcement presence, signage, and as well as collaboration with Alberta Parks on parking and congestion management strategies and their efforts up in the spray area. Sorry, I jumped ahead of slide there. Let's look at the infractions on 742. Some themes we've heard through customer service: a desire for non-resident annual fee option, several comments related to the $20 per hour being too costly. Non-residential property owners felt equally entitled to passes. And we had this multi-step process of adding a license plate after you were approved for a permit. Without that multi-step, we could have avoided some confusion and a number of infractions and later disputes for violations. So a software design issue. Things we heard from bylaw: a desire for us to allow for shorter pay durations to allow for dog walking or a short walk around the lake. Residents were appreciative of officers' presence at the lot and lake. Very few violations observed in the RPP, generally less than 1 or 2 per patrol, and that's attributed to regular presence of our additional seasonal officers. Residents were appreciative of Quarry Lake passes. However, there was some confusion with that through the app, and also some confusion over whether both of the lots were intended to be paid. So those are a few of the themes we heard from bylaw. Lessons learned: we undertook an internal lessons learned exercise. We learned that a number of items attributed to the effective management of congestion, increasing that lot, making it safe. The pricing wasn't effective in our opinion at managing demand and the design of the RPP zones. We had a high level of community engagement, and really that fundamentally changed the program between what we originally envisioned and what was implemented, and that was important. We had a positive overall customer service experience. The application software was user-friendly. We had an excellent customer service representative who was able to help customers and process that huge quantity of permits, and that was a success having that temp position. And then, of course, bylaw's capacity to enforce. We had new devices. The app worked quite well. We had the additional seasonal bylaw officers, new online ticket payment software, which cut down on administrative work. Several of the challenges, this was a multi-department coordination effort, which went quite well. However, it was resource intensive, and so we had a number of us involved in all aspects of the program, from responding to unique inquiries and dealing with complaints and program design, getting signs out. And so learning from that for future implementations will be important. There were high resources for managing permit processing and ticket appeals. Ticket appeals, a large part of that can be designed out with some changes to the software that will help make things clearer. We launched June 1st, a little later than we had hoped, and that's peak tax season. We had approvals very close to launch, which delayed the implementation. Took some time to get those system changes implemented. And we did see peak days where the lots were full. And on those days, bylaw officers served traffic control. We had to get signage out. So it didn't entirely eliminate the peak demand days, nor do I think it's realistic to ever hope for that. Next steps will be to receive feedback from council, and that can come through discussion today, or we're pleased to take it through corporate services team afterwards. We're reviewing compiled feedback from program users, incorporating those lessons learned into parking program updates and for further expansion. Looking forward to the town center implementation. And we intend to inform council material changes ahead of 22 peak season, or seek approvals where necessary for any material changes. So in summary, by the goals outlined in the original approval, the program has been a success. We've effectively managed demand while addressing spillover, all while maintaining and enhancing resident access. We've generated sufficient revenues to support the program, to fund a new seasonal transit route to the Quarry Lake area in support of our transportation plan, and have net revenues to continue to invest in maintaining and enhancing Quarry Lake Park. We have several lessons learned and feedback from visitors and residents alike that we can consider for future improvements. And of course, now an opportunity to hear from council. Your questions, comments, and feedback are always welcome, and will help our team. You've spent a good portion of your early going on the front lines with us, and so hearing what you heard over the summer to consider in the future planning is important. Thank you.
That's great. A really comprehensive overview of the summer, Mr. Sarte, and you really touched on pretty much everything that I've been hearing or reading through emails and whatnot, and I'm sure the rest of council. Certainly, there had been quite a bit of confusion in the earlier phase around the software design or proper registration. In fact, even the mayor got tripped up by the software confusion. So, but it's a learning curve, right? So I appreciate, and I've been telling people that just that we'll be learning from this first summer's operation, and fully expect that we would get this sort of report about now, and there'd be tweaks made to the program. And sitting in the office here, I often overheard conversations in the front reception, which I'm sure your team heard about as well. But most of the confusion or negative comments that I was overhearing, you have touched on. One thing that I am aware of being a problem occasionally, which you didn't mention, was because we rolled out this paid parking basically at the same time as the Alberta government rolled out the Canada's country fee. I did hear there was some confusion from visitors from likely the city or from the region, who just assumed that Quarry Lake was within Canada's country, and because they had the Canada's country pass, they thought they were covered, and they parked and then got a ticket, and they're understandably upset. So I don't know if you've talked about that with your team or not, but it's a simple fix with just, a bigger sign at the beginning saying the Canada's country fee doesn't apply here. So as I say, you've touched on all of the most all of the feedback and questions I have. I don't know about other members of council. Councillor Sanford.
Mayor Barman, thank you, Mr. Sargent, for that update. When is the season going to change to the lower fees?
The scheduled date, I believe, is mid-October after Thanksgiving. We have had some discussion about resetting that earlier, however. So sometime between now and mid-October, it will set to the lower rate.
Okay, and then when are you going to incorporate some of those learnings and changes into the program?
Right now, we're working with Park Plus and discussing how we can take what we've learned here, as well as what Banff has learned, and give consideration for how things could look with the town center rollout. To the mayor's point, we don't want to have too many different permits and passes and programs and zones. It gets all quite confusing. And so is there a way to take the learnings from this year, apply them to the town center, and have that in place for next busy season? So, targeting May of next year to roll out the changes.
So you'll keep the program, the off-season program, the same that you anticipated, and then change it for the coming summer or the coming spring?
But potentially some of the smaller tweaks and changes could be made in advance, depending what they are. I wouldn't hold off necessarily on making changes if they fit. We're just still in the process of figuring out what that will look like, gathering feedback. Once we know what the changes are, some could come before busy season for sure.
People are still buying passes. Like, everybody buys passes when they need a pass, right? It's not, there's no big buy a pass. It's just when you need it, you buy it.
That's right.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Councillor Comfort.
Yeah, the number one, not complaint, but wish, I guess, that I heard was for a shorter period, say a 1 hour free parking area. I don't know how spaces it would be, maybe 5 or 6. That people could pull in with their dog, do a circuit of the field at lunch hour, say, and then take off without having to worry about paid parking or not. So that's just something that I heard quite a bit, and I'm passing it on.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's something we all heard quite a bit, and I'm sure the management team did as well. Councillor Seeley. Unless did you have something else, Councillor Comfort?
Yeah, I did. I also wanted to give kudos to the staff at the town that were handling the questions about the permits and such. They were awesome. They were amazing. So patient, so so patient, so polite with people who were a little technically challenged, like my husband or myself. And they were great. They were just so excellent, quick, efficient, answered everything. It was great. So kudos to them.
Yeah, I'll second that, Councillor. I overheard, as I mentioned, several conversations in the front office there, and I was regularly impressed by the patience that the front desk staff were showing with people that were at times irate. It was really great to see our staff was managing the frustration and just trying to help people. So that was good to see. Councillor Seeley, did you have your hand up?
I did. Mr. Sarte, you talked about the price of $20 and you want a good visitor experience. And I think for the most part, it sounds like it worked out. There was availability where in the past before paid parking, it was jammed and overflowing. So would you say for the most part, there was availability even during busy times?
Certainly more availability. And if you look at that image of the 2 parking lots, you can imagine rolling into Quarry Lake in 2020 and being part of the lineups that were in between the aisles hunting for parking. in terms of an overall visitor experience, to come in and have parking available, to pay $20 and get the quality of facilities there. We had something like close to 15,000 transactions. So that's 15,000 customers. And relatively speaking, the number of people who complained about the cost and value proposition is an extremely small fraction. I think more so it's around if I'm just there to walk my dog and it's a shorter visit, can there be a different option for us, either a pass, or if we're out visitors, can there be a pass or a shorter duration is the one we heard most.
Thank you.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman, and thank you, Mr. Asardi, for your presentation. This was certainly an interesting pilot, and I am glad that we move forward with it. One of the questions that you hadn't had a chance to address yet was about the one free permit per household, and how there are some households in Canmore that might have a lot of people living in shared household situations. Have your team come up with any ideas on how to solve that moving forward?
No, we're still gathering info, and that was certainly something that we heard as well. There were these edge cases where you'd have 4 or 5 roommates, and they all used Quarry Lake, or number of children returning home from being at school and wanting to have passes. So we do have that on the list to look at flexibility and these unique cases to be able to have some more flexibility in the program.
I guess at the end of the day, it's not about one person, one pass, it's about cars, right?
Yeah, I think people found workarounds. It was relatively easy to change license plates. They could get a license plate added on another permit. But for a matter of convenience, from a customer service perspective, we are going to look at all of those unique cases and see if there are opportunities to solve it in a more straightforward way, other than exceptions, which we granted at times.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. With regards to the resident permit zones up and around the quarry, was there any residents asking to expand further into their areas? You said the areas that we set out as council worked well, so I was just curious if there was any residents that were expressing their willingness or wanting to have that expanded to their part of the street.
Perhaps someone from the team might have a different response. I didn't hear much of that. There were some cases where people parked within the zone but lived without, and so we expanded the eligible zone for the fixed RPP zone definition. I don't think we had requests for an expanded RPP zone, so I think it generally hit the mark. I don't see any chat coming through or anyone jumping in. So
I heard from a few residents that said that they really liked how it worked, that they found that they had more parking with the program running. Again, with the service construction, and there's a lot of construction going on in some of that area right now. Did we find any issues with trades trying to find a place to park on the work sites that are currently happening up there with the paid parking program currently?
I'm just waiting to see if Carla would like to weigh in. I know she dealt with, we had a makeshift contractor permit program for this year. There is a module with Park Plus that they're developing for us that would address the contractor piece. It was an issue for us, and I believe it was solved with temporary permitting for that.
Yes, that's correct, Andy. We did implement a paper permit for those contractors, and I worked personally with one of the contractors prior to implementing it to see if it would work. And I hadn't heard any negative feedback, but we are looking into that module.
Could you go into that module a little bit more? Is that going to be available to all trades throughout town, or is it, how would that potentially roll out? And if you don't have it right now, obviously, because you're working on it, I totally understand.
I haven't personally seen the module yet, so I guess that would be something that the team would discuss once we know what those parameters look like.
Okay, thank you.
I believe
Further questions?
Mr. Burt may have had a comment for the RPP zones.
Mr. Burt, did you have something to add?
No, I don't have anything further to add. Carla and Andy covered it. Thanks.
Great. Are there other questions from members of council? I just have one last question, and it's for future consideration. So clearly the net revenues were much stronger than we had expected or anticipated. I expect your team is thinking about that and considering options. I mean, clearly there's an option to reduce the fee if the revenues are that strong over and above expenses. What thoughts do you have in that regard?
The fees are set from not necessarily to target a revenue, but to manage the demand. So what I would say is that all of this will be reviewed. So all of the metrics and data and statistics. We know that there's off-peak times when potentially we could use those times to allow for people to get in for those lower cost dog walks or pass holders from out of town to use the park. So it's all intertwined. The net revenues are a result of designing a program to manage demand, manage spillover. And while strong, there are some seasonal factors there that might have contributed to that. So I think we'll sit back, we'll review the data, we'll review the feedback, we'll try to address the concerns around cost that we heard, while still rolling out a program next season that's going to meet the primary goals.
Thank you. Councillor Comfort.
Sorry, I thought of another question, and this is kind of a goofy question, which is, has there been any thought to contacting the province to see if they would allow us to get some of the revenue from their Kananaskis parking or their Kananaskis park, and then we could allow those people that have those passes to park at Quarry Lake? I know
it hasn't been done. It's a good suggestion to talk with them about collaborating on these types of things. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Seeing no further questions, thanks very much for bringing this report today, Mr. Asarte. We've been looking forward to it, and I agree with some of the earlier comments. This is, in my opinion, been a very, very successful initial trial year, and look forward to seeing how it may be modified for future years. But yeah, it looks really good. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
That we will move on to item D4, which is the impact of Canada Emergency Response Benefit on low-income senior benefits. Ms. Gilchrist.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I am going to try and share my screen. I do have a little presentation here, but I'm on a new device. So a year and a half in, I'm still always scared that my sharing isn't going to work. So bear with me. I sure hope it does. Here we go. Is that working? Can everybody see?
Yeah, if you want to, we can see that. There you go. That looks good. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. So yeah, I really appreciate the time this afternoon just to really give you an update to let you know that this particular emergency benefit has caused a bit of difficulty and a bit of negativity and things on some of our lowest income seniors. And so in this presentation, I will share with you a little bit about what that is. I'll give you a couple of sort of local scenarios of folks that we've seen. And then the role that FCSS is playing when these programs are things that we don't actually have sort of a lot of control over, and yet we have people walking into our office looking for solution. So essentially this Canadian response benefit could be applied for through two streams. There was a CRA stream and there was a Service Canada stream. And, you know, a lot of the information surrounding that and the long-term implications and consequences of that was not clearly understood for folks. And what was happening to some of our seniors and in their lives was they were applying, or well-meaning friends or family members were applying on their behalf. Seeing this as for that lowest of kind of low-income seniors as an opportunity that they appeared to be eligible, and some of them were eligible. And so it was an opportunity for a time to have a bit of a leg up in terms of what their finances looked like. As a result of that, if people applied for the full benefit in 2020, their income basically went up by $14,000 on their notice of assessment from their 2020 taxes. And as a result of that, the two main programs that our local seniors access if they are of the lowest sort of income level are Alberta Seniors Benefits and the federal program that's the Guaranteed Income Supplement. Both of those programs are based on the income from your previous tax year. So come their July checks here, beginning at the end of July, I think the 28th, some of them got their first warning that the impact of having received that CERB had a significant income impact on these two benefit services. So with Alberta Seniors Benefits, they were either clawed back or denied completely depending upon how much of that CERB benefit they received. Those people are invited to attempt to get their benefits reinstated by completing an income estimate form. There's no guarantee once they complete that form that their benefits will be reinstated. And it's quite challenging because there's really no timeline on the decision making or the processing on that. That being said, however, our Alberta government has said they've scaled up staffing to address this and try to decrease the response times. In terms of the guaranteed income supplement with the federal government, those benefits also with that increase in income for people were either clawed back or denied. So seniors who had applied through the CRA stream, there's absolutely no options available to them in terms of having their benefits reinstated. Folks who applied through the Service Canada stream, there is some option for them. Some of the difficulty and confusion surrounding that is most people have no idea what stream they applied through. They're having to call the government and sit in a long queue to even find out if they're eligible through that Service Canada stream to ask for reinstatement. So if you are had applied through that stream, essentially you plead your case. Whoever that worker is on the other end of the phone decides whether or not that person is eligible to receive an income estimate form. If that's deemed appropriate, that form is sent to those applicants. That again is no guarantee of reinstatement. That's just giving them an opportunity to complete these income estimate forms. And again, in a situation here where this has already impacted folks starting on basically August 1st, and there's no timeline on processing or decision-making surrounding this. The other sort of difficulty around these income estimate forms is it really requires folks to have been very good record keepers. And we don't always find that all of the clients have needed to do that in the past. And so getting those estimate forms and getting those records kept is a bit of a challenge. So locally, we haven't seen a massive amount of seniors coming forward. We have seen a handful. We also are hearing anecdotally through our provincial partners and various other regional conversations that there's a bit of a senior reluctance also to step forward and ask for reinstatement. And part of that is surrounding this idea that maybe they weren't actually eligible for the CERB and that they'll, by shining a spotlight on themselves, they'll create a situation where not only do they not have their benefits reinstated, but they have a repayment requirement to the CERB benefit. So I don't know that if they had their taxes done, I think that's when that would have happened, but there is this reluctance out there. So one of the local situations I'll share with you is a long-term client we have at FCSS, turned 65 in 2021. And so they were going to be transitioning from assured income for the severely handicapped to sort of CPP and old age security. When that transition happens for a person out of an AISH benefit onto that other benefit, there's always a decrease in their income and the benefits shift, and there's an increase in their medication costs that they're responsible for. So that was happening for this person anyway. And also this person, part of their AISH is that they have some pretty severe cognitive impairments. This person had a well-meaning family member who applied to CERB on their behalf and received the full $14,000 in 2020. So what this impact was on this client was that they didn't qualify because of that surge in income in 2020 for either Alberta Seniors Benefits or Guaranteed Income Supplement. The rent supplement that they currently receive through Bow Valley Regional Housing, the Alberta Government Rent Supplement Program, also decreased by $500 a month because of that bump up in income. And after they paid their rent, they had $300 left for all their other monthly expenses, including that sort of medication increase percentage that they were going to now incur as well. The second scenario I would just like to share with you was a client actually at CCH. And so they're a Vital Homes rental client, and they came there completely distraught. And CCH made the referral and walked them over to FCSS. So it's really great to have that great partnership where they knew that we could sort of help this person, support this person, and work together with CCH to hopefully come to a really good outcome for the client. That client also had received the full CERB benefit in 2020. And the impact on that particular senior was that they had clawbacks in both their Alberta Seniors Benefits and their Guaranteed Income Supplement. And they were $300 short of even making their rent, with $0 left for all remaining monthly expenses. So it's a difficult situation to some degree for FCSS because people are coming our way. They're really wanting us to have solutions and to be able to check on the status once they've completed some of these processes. And we don't have access to those. They're not our programs. We don't have an Alberta Seniors Supports Worker or Alberta Supports Worker in our local office that people can chat to. So they come to us. So some of the roles we've played for the clients through this have been to listen and support and help them find that place of calm so that they can move forward and get to a space where we can start problem solving. During that process, we assess their needs, and we also assess the level of support that's required for them. So of those two folks that I sort of gave you their situations, one of those people needed us to really provide a lot of support. The other needed a lot of information and then would go out and complete those things and take the actions required. So we provided information to all these folks in terms of the information of how to get the benefits reinstated. We inform of how to access those forms for Alberta Seniors Benefits and GIS, or for the other client, we assisted in the process of accessing and in the completion of those forms and getting them sent off to the correct destination. We also have informed them that they can self-advocate with the MLA, Miranda Rosen's office, or with the MP, Blake Richards' office, or FCSS can also attend those meetings with the senior to support their advocacy. So for the one client we mentioned who had some cognitive impairments and struggles to articulate the situation, we attended those self-advocacies, shared his story in terms of trying to get some action specifically for that client. FCSS also provided information and provides information about Bow Valley Regional Housing, both their actual units as well as the direct rent supplement, and or we assist in the completion of those applications. We've also then connect folks to other services. So if we can take some of the money that they may be spending on food and connect them to food supports and get them able to save a little bit more money towards some of the rent and things where they may be at risk of eviction. We've also directed them to the bridging loans, which is that sort of bridge of finances between housing, so that if in fact their pending application gets them some money, that we've been able to secure that housing without eviction in the short term. There's a little bit of reluctance that we're finding from seniors there, in that as low income, fixed income seniors, they don't feel maybe they can pay that loan back at any point. So a little bit reluctant about taking that bridge loan, but that's just a little bit of more education and support on our behalf to, if it's the right solution for somebody, to really encourage them to access that. And then also, you know, this is quite troubling, both on their mental health and things like that. And so making those referrals to mental health or solution focused counseling to support folks who are really struggling. So I also wanted to just let you know there's a bit of advocacy going on out there. Seniors are being encouraged to talk to their MLAs and MPs about this. Some of the large senior serving organizations in Alberta are really asking and hoping for a 1-year exemption that automatically puts our seniors back to their benefits levels from 2019 without folks having to go through a rigorous process to have that happen. If that's not happening, they're asking for some smaller sort of pieces, and one would be providing online options for service providers. So for example, when FCSS supports somebody through this process, we have no way of online submitting any of these documents on their behalf. It goes in the snail mail. And so a way of having that link, and also so that we could then check status and get status updates directly from where it's landing to support those clients. And they're also asking for, you know, quick defined timelines if they're going to stick with the process that they have now, so that people aren't forever kind of out in limbo, wondering that they have a defined timeline, that they'll have an answer to their situation at a particular time, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever that timeline is, as quick as possible. So unfortunately, we know that we've got this sort of situation where we've got some folks out there struggling. If you hear of anybody that's struggling, please send them our way, and we will continue to support them through this process. So that's all I have to say on the matter. I'm happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
Great. Thanks very much for the report, and certainly a concern. I hadn't heard much of this matter before, and it's good to know that you and your team are there to support people at these times. The only question I have is around the access to the CERB grant. The two individuals that you referred to, did they both qualify for a CERB, or?
Yeah, neither one of them had to pay the CERB back.
Okay.
So it was unclear at times, you know, sort of the longer term implications of receiving that.
I see.
Yeah, it sort of felt like a bonus to really low income people who, for a brief period of time, they might be able to do a few things that they really needed to do. And a lot of it was actually well-meaning friends and family who did that accessing. And yeah, so it's unfortunate.
All right, thank you. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman, and thank you, Tar, for this presentation. This is really, once you started talking, I could see the ripples of repercussion rolling out in my mind, and that was where my face, anyways. So you have said that you believe that there's just a handful of people in Canmore that perhaps are in this situation.
There's
Is that-
only a handful who've reached out at this point, Joanna.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And so I'm trying to understand, sort of, their income goes up for that year. They have to file their income tax every year to receive the services that they get, or the benefits they have to be when they're low income. So the CERB then bumps them up for that taxation year. And then the following year, they no longer are eligible for those services. But the year after that, they would be.
Yes.
So this isn't a permanent injury. This is temporary. And were these people, were they working? Because that's what the CERB was for. Was it not for people who were working?
It only needed that $5,000 in that window prior to in that year of income. And so it's because people might have been supplementing or were working, but their total income still had them qualifying for those other benefits. It didn't, you didn't have to have been working very much at all in order to qualify for CERB benefits.
Right, I'm just looking at the criteria here. So you did not apply for nor receive the CERB. You did not quit your job voluntarily. You reside in Canada or at least 15 years old. You earned a minimum of $5,000 before taxes in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
From employment income, self-employment income, and provincial benefit payments to maternity or parental.
Yeah.
So they were all then some working in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And so the real injury here isn't that they had to pay it back, because you clearly said that they didn't. The injury is that it affected their benefits in the following year.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But I just want to make sure they didn't have to pay that back, though.
Yeah, not any of the ones that we have seen.
Yes, so far. And the few that you've.
Yeah.
And has the province said how many cases like this they're looking at across the province?
They haven't, but they've upped their staffing, but they haven't said how many cases that they're seeing. But certainly, Edmonton put a real flag on it very quickly that they were seeing massive numbers of seniors impacted. So I would imagine Calgary is the same.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for answering my questions. Thanks for bringing this to light.
You're welcome.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. Thank you, Ms. Gilchrist, for that presentation. That was kind of eye-opening. Is the Alberta Supports, or formerly Social Services Office, open yet in Canmore? Are they open? They've been closed during the pandemic, right?
Yes. So there is that somebody I think can have a walk-in appointment with Alberta Works. We don't have an Alberta Supports worker anymore at all, even when it is open prior to the pandemic. So there's something called an Alberta Supports worker, is where people can go from all of the different Alberta types of supports, whether it's children's services, whether it's Alberta Works, whether it's Alberta Seniors Benefits, and that person will work with them on the status of their application, where it's at, what they need to do, any of those things. We don't have one of those workers at all in Canmore anymore. So that is something I have to say. There's a resolution coming to AUMA on behalf of Westlock asking that areas have walk-in service reinstated and Alberta Supports workers in those rural areas for us to access. So we do have one worker who's back in our office. You can get an appointment with him. He's primarily Alberta Works, but they've kept the centralized system where everybody has to call in through a central system. And so our local people are not necessarily working with our local worker.
And it's harder for them to get the help they need because it's all by phone, and you can have a person help you.
Yes. And we do have a lot of low income folks who don't have a phone that they are paying a plan on. So they have a phone that only works when they have their through the internet. And so then they turn it off sometimes to save things, and they can't get a hold of them back. So it's a bit of a challenge through that entire system. So our FCSSA Association is looking at a resolution, and I just saw a sample resolution that's going to AUMA regarding Alberta supports in rural communities. So.
Well, I did talk to our MLA about this because it's a real deficiency for our community. So,
yeah.
And those people would have access to the records too. They'd be able to get into the records to get.
Yes.
Yeah, so, and you don't have that opportunity because
Nope.
you have the system.
That's correct.
Well, thank you very much.
Councillor Comfort.
I just wondered if Banff has that worker.
No, Banff doesn't have an office at all. So even when there is a worker in the Bow Valley, it's based out of the provincial building here in Canmore, and Banff residents come here. So there is nobody in the Bow Valley in an Alberta supports role at this point.
So perhaps we could advocate with the province to have maybe a shared worker, sort of 2 days, 3 days here and 2 in Banff or something like that. How would we do that? Would administration help us do that?
I think we could, and I think we could also tag on to some of those bigger pieces as well that are all rural is looking to do that through that AUMA being the channel, or maybe RMA, as well as our FCSSA association doing that, and we could offer support as a municipality.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councillor Comfort or McCallum.
Thank you. Could you happen to know who the councillor sponsoring it through Westlock is, or is it the county, or is it
it's your friend? It's Morty.
Morty?
It's Morty from, yeah.
A good excuse to give him a call. I owe him a phone call. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, thanks again, Ms. Gilchrist, for bringing this report to council.
Thank you.
That I will move on to item E1, councillor updates. And as usual, throw the floor open. Any councillor that has questions for other councillors, raise their hands. I have 1 or 2 questions for Councillor Sanford under her report. Under the Bow Valley Waste Management Commission, the 3rd bullet point references the process to require haulers bringing clean cover to test soil samples in advance. I recall when this was initiated, there was quite a bit of concern we heard from the development community. Can you just give us an update on how it's playing out in the real world?
Yeah, it seems to be working. People are finding a process that is reasonable and acceptable. And the Waste Commission has to go through this step because the Waste Commission doesn't have authority to take contaminated soils. So they have to do it. And it seems to be functioning.
Good. I certainly haven't heard anything in several months from anybody on that. So as you suggest, I guess the development community's got it dialed. Good to hear.
Yeah.
I had a question as well for Comfort on your report, Councillor Comfort, regarding having to do with, I guess it all had to do with the Public Art Committee report. And under K, you reference some work that Pascal Ouellette's doing. A couple of questions. So what does AOB stand for in that report?
Any other business?
Pardon me?
Any other business.
Okay.
It's okay, I had to look it up too.
So I'm not familiar with this work. It wasn't the result of a public art competition. So what exactly is this project where Pascal's presumably creating some public art at the rec center?
So initially it was part of the neighborhoods project. So each neighborhood comes up with its own project, public art project, and shepherds it through the process and like that. And they were thinking of a similar process for the rec center, but then they realized it's such a big space and there's so much to consider. Initially, they were just going to do something that celebrated the athletic activities that happen there. but then they realized there was a lot more potential, and they involved the staff there, and the staff had some, as often happens, huge, big ideas that there wasn't really money for or resources for. So they're going back and revisiting it. So that's what that's about. It's sort of in process, if you will.
Who's the they that you're talking about, Bill?
So that would be Chris Bartolome and her staff.
Okay, so this is outside of any need for a public competition for,
No, yeah,
Part?
it's a local thing, yeah.
okay. Thanks. Are there other questions from members of council for other members of council? Councillor Stanford.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. I'd like to ask Councillor Mara about the economics of the Bow Valley Regional Housing Project, where there's a $900,000 commitment to the project. Where would those funds be coming from? For the capital budget?
There we go. They're coming from our reserve fund. We have a reserve fund for this, for our building projects, capital building projects.
Mhm.
We committed that to the province and for the project to move, province in order for that to move forward.
Okay. And so will those reserve funds need to be replenished at some point?
Yes, they do, and that's why there was an increase. And there's a little blurb in the paper, and I also put it in one of our reports that needs to be replenishments, and that's why we had it on our requisition.
Is that in the 2021 requisition? Is that reflected in 2021 or coming up?
Correct.
21. Okay. All right. Thanks very much.
Any other questions from members of council on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move on to item F1, which is administrative update. And just before we get into that, Ms. DeSoto was going to bring a verbal update on Town of Canmore response to changes in COVID restrictions and protocol. Ms. DeSoto.
Sure, I will be happy to provide that now. I did produce a little PowerPoint presentation that I can share with council.
That was quick.
Can you see that?
Yes, you can.
Yeah. All right. So as you know, there were new provincial health measures announced last week on September 16th. So in addition, with declaring a state of public health emergency, the province implemented new restrictions that went into effect immediately, including mandatory face masks for all indoor public settings, physical distance requirements in indoor and outdoor public settings, capacity limits and program restrictions, and work from home orders. And then, of course, they said that some of these restrictions could be exempted should business operations or entities choose to participate in what they're calling the Restriction Exemption Program, or the REP. And so I just wanted to go through with council what that REP looks like and how it affects our operations as a municipality, and then answer any questions you might have. Because the actual orders that the province issues following these announcements are very detailed and complex and quite confusing, in all honesty. So what is the Restrictions Exemption Program? Well, as I noted, if businesses, there's a list of businesses, and I'll get to that in a moment. Certain businesses can operate without the majority of public health restrictions impacting them if they choose to screen patrons entering their facilities for one of the following: either a proof of vaccination or a proof of a negative COVID test, with that COVID test result coming within the last 72 hours, or a medical exemption letter. And so The defined businesses, certain businesses are excluded or what's called out of scope. And I've grouped these into big sort of categories. But the defined businesses include restaurants, nightclubs, entertainment centers like bowling alleys, museums, art galleries, movie theaters, conference facilities, professional sporting and performance events. It includes private social events held in public facilities. So that would include weddings and funerals. And it impacts or includes recreation and fitness facilities. And it would apply to players, participants, spectators. So that's where it impacts us as a municipality the most. And operators who do not implement an REP must fully implement all the public health restrictions that were announced on the September 16th date. So what does that mean for access to municipal buildings? Well, there's sort of two big impacts depending on our buildings. And so for our recreation facilities, which include Elevation Place and the Canmore Recreation Center, as well as the Family Resource Network, which operates out of the building behind the Civic Center here and co-located with the Seniors Center. So both our recreation facilities and the FRN facility will be implementing a restriction exemption program. So for our rec facilities, they implemented that right away, starting yesterday on September 20th. The FRN program is closed this week, but is working out the details of implementing it for next week. And what that means is patrons born 2009 and earlier, so that's basically 12 years of age or older, in order to enter those facilities, we'll need to provide proof of vaccination or that negative PCR or rapid test within the last 72 hours or a medical exemption letter. Now, the only restriction that remains, if one of those things is provided and you're a patron and you enter our facility, you're exempt from all other restrictions except for masking. You must still mask in indoor public spaces unless you're participating in that physical activity or sitting down and eating. If in the case of Elevation Place, for example, you've brought a meal or purchased a meal there. Although, sorry, I should interject because our common areas in Elevation Place and Canmore Rec Center are currently closed while we try to work through these orders. Sorry, before I get to the other building side, I will say that Councillor McCallum made me aware earlier today about some new information that just yesterday, the Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dina Hinshaw, announced that the province had clarified that youth between the ages of 12 and 18 who were unvaccinated would not be required by public health order to show proof of vaccination in order to participate in sport, recreation, or performance activities. So that is contrary to the order, which references the year 2009. And so we're just reviewing that and looking through that and how that might impact our recreation programs, but we haven't made a decision on that as yet. So back to our other buildings, which includes the Civic Center and Public Works, etc. So we are not putting a restriction exemption program in place for those facilities. And what's different this time around, since, you know, sort of the last time we were in a public health emergency, is we're not planning to close our facilities. We are planning to keep them open for in-person services. And so our various departments in those buildings will keep either a rotation of staff or front desk staff in the facility to address any clients that want to come to our facilities in person. And in the Civic Center, that includes our FCSS office. But the as per the health order, all the restrictions that were announced on September 16th must be in place. So patrons must wear face masks and observe physical distancing. We are also and have always left those plexiglass barriers in place at the customer service counters. We are implementing the work from home order. So managers are working with their teams to allow many from their teams that would be in the office to once again work from home as operational needs allow. And then as far as staff are concerned, staff must be masked and remain physically distant when they are in the common areas of our buildings and not seated at a workstation. So that's the main impact to our municipal buildings. Some of the other safeguard measures we're implementing for staff, just as a, certainly a due diligence measure. The first is a voluntary rapid testing program for staff. So what this program looks like is any staff that wants to be a part of it. It's a screening program to help identify and prevent asymptomatic spread of COVID-19 in our workplace. So again, it's been announced through our regular communication channels with staff, and they are able to register through our Human Resources Department. The program will be offered through an external pharmacy. The staff would have to book an appointment, but could go have a test completed. These tests, though, are specific for asymptomatic people. If staff have any symptoms that are COVID or COVID-like symptoms, they are not to use this program. They are to book their PCR test through the Alberta Health Services office and follow the province's mandatory isolation protocols. The other thing we're doing is requiring all staff to disclose their vaccination status. Last week, I issued a request to staff to do that, and we put in a process that took a couple of weeks to develop so that that could be done through our HR management software and kept completely confidential, with only our human resources staff able to view that information. So staff are being asked to, by October 1st, disclose their vaccination status. Again, it will be a confidential disclosure to our Human Resources Department only. And once we have that data, we will be able to review it and make further decisions regarding possible mandatory vaccinations for staff. So I did want to just talk a little bit about the kinds of considerations we have to look at when we're looking at mandating vaccines. I think you're aware that as an employer, the town of Canmore has an obligation to provide a safe and healthy workplace. And so part of that obligation requires us to identify hazards and take steps to mitigate and or reduce the hazards. And Alberta Health and Safety has identified COVID-19 as a legitimate workplace hazard. So we are looking at, of course, all of our mitigation methods for reducing that hazard. But there's an added complexity when we look at mandating vaccines, because public health information and decisions regarding your personal public health have legitimate privacy and protected grounds considerations. So we wouldn't take these actions lightly. And the question we need to ask ourselves is, is mandating vaccines a reasonable and necessary mitigation of the workplace hazard we face? And so, what we're considering is to look at the unique circumstances of the work environment within our municipal operations. Are we providing services to vulnerable sector individuals? Are there less intrusive mitigations that sufficiently address a hazard such as the COVID-19 virus? Can work be carried out safely if staff and patrons are masked and physically distanced? And what is the extent, and this is the reason why we've decided to ask employees to disclose their vaccination status is, once we know the extent of vaccine uptake within our staff, we can certainly plan accordingly. So our next steps in that regard is just to get all that information by October 1st, and then assess the working environment where there are unvaccinated employees or groups of unvaccinated employees, and determine whether the mitigations that we've got at our disposal, such as physical distancing, masking, and other barriers, are sufficient for that hazard control, or whether we need to implement a mandatory vaccination program for staff to reduce the hazard further. So we're in the process of doing that, and we'll certainly keep this council and the next updated as we make decisions. We do see that as an administrative decision. As I mentioned, it's an employer's obligation to ensure a safe and healthy workplace, and that is administration's responsibility, not a political decision. So that was the end of what I was going to share, and I am happy to take any questions that council may have.
Thank you very much. I think admin, I think you're taking a really well-considered approach to implementing these guidelines and actions within the town. So appreciate the amount of work that's gone into the planning for these actions at the senior admin level. And I don't recall whether, I don't think council was asked to provide information on our vaccination record, but is there an interest in having that information from council as well?
Well, you are not staff, but certainly, yes, if council's wishing to disclose it, and certainly if we would to be moving back to any kind of in-person meetings, we would be requesting that information.
So maybe you could just have somebody send out a link for any councillors that want to provide that information to do so.
Yes, we can do so. As I mentioned, we do it through our HR software, the Dayforce program, and I know you're all connected to that. So I will ask our HR department to include council in that.
They may have done so, but
They have.
great. So I'll look on Dayforce and great, thanks. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, thanks for putting this report together in short order.
You're welcome.
Then just looking at the a report that's in the printed agenda, the agenda item F1. We can look for any questions from members of council on related to any of the report items. I have a question under municipal infrastructure. And it's under B, I guess, capital projects. There's a reference to the functional analysis of potential Trans-Canada Highway pedestrian crossing. And indicates the analysis has been completed. Will be the basis for future work. Is that something then that would be included in the 2022 budget for consideration by next council?
It is not currently included in our 2022 budget, but we do just need to do that preliminary functional design work, just as we anticipate further infrastructure or planning projects along that corridor. We just need to know what we should be protecting for a future pedestrian crossing.
Okay, so this isn't suggesting that the structure is imminently to be built. It's just it's important for other planning processes to have a handle on where this pedestrian crossing may be located. Is that what I'm understanding?
Correct. We want to protect the opportunity for it in the future, and that requires us to do some initial investigation into it.
Great, that's good to hear. Thank you. I'm looking to see if there's any hands up from members of council. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. I'm looking at municipal services 2D, childminding services. Is this still in play even with the new orders from the provincial government at Elevation Place?
I am going to be working with Elevation Place right away to see if it is in place. Maybe Lisa has more or Ms. DeSoto has more information, but child minding is not covered under the, it's not covered under the order, so you can continue to do childcare services. So I'm not sure the impact of that on our services at this point.
All right, well, assuming it's happening, I'm very happy that it's happening. And I'm excited that that's a little bit of relief that parents can have when they go to the pool or gym or whatever. My next question was item 3A, the fire station. So it says your fire rescue continues to work closely with facilities and the architects to develop 90% design drawings. So those design drawings will then go to tender, and will that tender amount, that's still a budget item that we need to, that needs to be, the next council needs to approve for 2022, correct?
Yes, I think I can take that question for you, Councillor McCallum. So we would not go to tender until that is approved by the next council as part of the 2022 budget. So the only approval we have currently is for the enabling works.
Yeah.
And for the design. So we will have good project budgeting and hopefully in order to put a budget request forward for 2022.
So those won't be Class C drawings that we will be putting budgeting on. They'll be like decent, like, I guess what I'm concerned about is understanding the project and the size of the project. What's going to come first? Is it going to be the bids that come in that dictate the budget, or is it going to be the design budgeting that dictates the budget number that council approves?
Ms. Smithers.
Sorry, it was under municipal services, but then you kind of jumped into
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Life's like that some days. Yeah, so I believe that the design drawings they're working on right now are like 90% drawings. So the budget that will be included in the 2022 capital plan is really I pretty much at tender quality drawings.
Okay. All right, perfect. Thank you so much.
That's great to hear. Thank you. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. I'm looking at the under corporate services number 3 municipal clerk 3C. The clerk's office has received a request to access for information. So far, 50,000 records that meet the search criteria have been identified. How are those records to be given to the FOIP? How do they do the FOIP request on 50,000 records? Is it digital or?
Yes, it's digital. Thank you. Yeah, yes, it's digital, Councillor Sanford, and most of the records are email records that we've gathered using discovery software.
So do you cut and paste them into a thing?
We'll convert them into PDF once we've reviewed them. So we've reduced the number. We've been able to do some software searches for duplicates, and we've reduced the number of records to 32,000. And as of a week ago, the last time we did a review, we were 12% complete of reviewing the documents just for responsiveness. So the way the e-discovery search works is you can't exactly get emails that are only responsive to the request. You get some other stuff too that might share similar terminology. So our process right now is to review everything for responsiveness. Once that's done, we'll be converting everything to PDF to provide to the applicant.
Sounds like a huge workload.
Well, we estimate that we have 256 working hours to go, which is, what did I work that out to be? It's, I think it was 41 days full-time, and we don't have full-time resources in my office to dedicate to that. So just today, I submitted a request to the Privacy Commissioner's office for an extension.
Okay, thanks. Sounds huge.
A lot of records to review, you bet.
Thank you.
Are there any other, thanks, Ms. Hyde. Are there any other questions, members of council, regarding the administrative update? Seeing none, I'll move on to the last item, G1, council resolution action list. Are there any questions or comments on that agenda item from members of council? Seeing none, I believe that will bring us to, by golly, adjournment. So I'll move that the Councillor McCallum.
I just wanted to congratulate you on your last committee of the whole, your worship.
We almost didn't make it through with that loss of a video feed or whatever. So, but yeah, thank goodness that IT managed to correct that. Yep, my last committee of the whole, and Councillor Comforts as well. In any case, with that, I'll move that we adjourn this meeting. Those in favor and opposed, meeting's adjourned. Thanks very much. We'll see you all around.